do it.
Let's do it. Hello, Arty Peoples, and welcome to another episode of Jerry's Live. My name is Emmy Klein, and I am your host this evening. Now, as you can see, I have a person here with me today. Whole person, love it. So, everybody, please welcome Reuben Negrón,
Thank you.
the teaching artist for Winsor Newton. He has an amazing show planned for us today. I'm very excited, especially looking at these colors that we have on our palette here and what he's been planning. I'm so excited. So before I officially hand it off to him, I just wanted to remind you guys, if you are interested in anything that we are using on today's show, make sure you go to the website, JerrysArtarama.com, and type in today's class code. That is going to be JL383. I believe it's down, yep, right about here. And it'll remain on the screen all throughout the show in case you want to reference it back. There's also links in our description for you to check it out that way. But if you type that code into our the search bar on our website, the teacher's cart will come up and you can check everything out there. So, officially, without any further ado, I'm going to hand it off to you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you for having me once again. It's great to be back.
We love having you here. It's great. All good shows.
Well, I appreciate that. Yeah. Thank you. Today we're going to be talking about sketchbooks, which is a subject that is very close to my heart. Fun fact, I still have every single sketchbook I have ever had since middle school. I have them all collected in my studio, and they
are they dated?
They are dated.
Oh my gosh, I love this.
Yep.
That just itches like the OCD part of my brain.
You know,
I'm so excited.
Years from now, when anyone wants to do like a retrospective or go back into my archives, they can go through my sketchbooks and kind of like map my progress as an artist by doing that. So. Yeah, big fan of sketchbooks. I actually typically have several sketchbooks that I work in at a time. I used to kind of just like have one sketchbook, would fill it up and move on to the next one. But in recent years, and by recent I would say probably the last dozen or so years, I've started working in several different sketchbooks at the same time just because of different paper quality, sizes, uses.
Start learning more and more about paper and accumulating all the sketchbooks.
Exactly. So yeah, we're going to talk about sketchbooks, and I think that this is a fitting subject, especially with summer.
Oh yeah. Traveling.
Yeah.
If you're going around with family and exploring other areas, if you're going to conventions, like I was just at the Lake Tahoe for the plein air convention, which was amazing. Going around, traveling, this is just something you can throw in your bag.
Exactly.
Go.
I'm also, in addition to being a teaching artist for Winsor & Newton, I also am on the faculty at UNC Asheville and also just a working artist. So summertime is the time when I get to travel and play and experiment and get in the studio and try out new things. And most of the time that's happening in my sketchbook. So I have a couple sketchbooks that I brought with me today just to like share with everyone to show different use cases for how you can use a sketchbook and maintain a sketchbook practice. And then I've also got a bunch of tools with me, some watercolor paints, a couple gouaches, different brushes, fine line pens, so on and so forth, just so that we can talk about like different tools that you can use, that you can put into your kit, things that you might want to have in your home studio or things that might be able to travel with you, and just like different ways to kind of like think about the idea of the sketchbook. So for me, the sketchbook is really a place for experimentation. It's a place where I can try out new tools, new colors, new materials.
Oh, yes.
I can try out new ideas.
Yeah, it's a good place to not be precious with your art.
Exactly. It's a great place to do preparatory drawings
for
something that might be, you know, a larger project. And in many cases, I just actually use it as like a journal to write in, to kind of like flesh out my ideas in text, even separate from drawing.
Very cool.
You know, and then from there, the images develop.
Okay.
So I'm going to share all of that with you today. And yeah, so actually what I have right here, just to kind of let everyone know who's watching online, I have my current sketchbook, which I'm in love with. This is a watercolor sketchbook, which is, what is the name of this one?
Oh, jeez. Starts with a G.
Handbook journal.
Handbook journal.
Handbook
But
journal.
it's made by, no, it starts,
Global art?
Global Art. That is the G that I was thinking of. Global Art Handbook.
Big fan.
It is amazing.
Really great paper.
Yes.
It has held up to everything that I've thrown at it. So I'm liking this one right now.
Yeah.
And as you can see just on this first page here, if you're looking down, like I said, I like to test out my materials. And with every time I get a new sketchbook, I'm testing out the paper, I'm testing out
for
materials,
sure.
colors, and so on and so forth. So here I've got a bunch of color swatches. This is actually from an old Winsor Newton Cotman travel field set that I got
Nice.
probably when I was in college.
Oh, wow.
And I still have it.
Oh.
And so these are the
Watercolors
colors
last
for that.
forever.
They really do.
They do. They do.
And then up the top here, I have, I've been also testing out the Winsor Newton fine liners, which I'm a huge fan of because it's waterproof ink.
Yes.
So, marries well with watercolor and gouache.
So important to know what your ink is going to do, especially when working with water-based media.
Absolutely.
Oh my gosh.
As long as the one thing I will say is like, as long as you let it dry properly, you can go ahead and paint on top of it, layer on top of it, and it holds a beautiful black solid line all the time.
Yeah.
Just let it dry. I have experimented where like I've made a mark and then just like put water on it immediately, and it does bleed a little bit, but as soon as you let it dry,
Yeah, it's permanent.
stays put. Stays put. It's permanent. So I've been testing that out here, and then on this side here on these little swatches, this is actually test swatches from the Winsor Newton Professional Watercolors field set, which I've been using recently. And then down here, we have the Winsor Newton Revival colors, which I am definitely going to be talking about because this is a set of colors that I've been using quite a bit lately. And actually the examples that I'm going to show in the sketchbook have all been made using just these colors. This is a set of 8 pigments that were released last year, and they essentially bring back retired colors. So the idea with Revival was that they went back into the archives and they either found substitutions for pigments that had been phased out for various reasons, either availability or just toxicity of certain pigments like cobalts and stuff that we don't really want to use anymore.
For sure.
But then also recipes of colors that are from the Winsor Newton archives, especially through the work done by George Fields, who was the chemist and colorist from back in the day. Fields Orange, exactly. Yes.
Makes sense.
We'll talk. Oh, that's one of my favorites.
We're excited.
Yeah, and we are also going to do a little demo with a polka dot plant, and I'm going to show how to use Frisket, art masking fluid, which is a Frisket. It's a latex-based liquid masking fluid that you can lay down as a resist so that it preserves the underlying color or the white of the paper, whatever you've laid down. Yeah, and we'll just kind of go through that and show some of the examples of what I've been playing with.
Yeah, definitely. I always love sketchbooks because it's some of it's like a sneak peek into someone's brain.
Absolutely, yeah.
Because you get to see kind of how they're working out the problems that is art, which is so cool.
Yeah, and for me, that's the whole fun of it, right? You know, artists are problem solvers. We like to kind of experiment and tinker and come up with this idea in our head and figure out, okay, how can we make that real? How can we make that tangible?
Yes.
And a lot of that can happen right here. And actually, I brought, as I said, I brought some of my older sketchbooks. This is a perfect example of that. This is an older sketchbook of mine where back in the day when I was working as a storyboardist for marketing and advertising, this was laying out thumbnails for storyboards, and then also here some sketches and thumbnails for painting compositions and stuff like that. This is just the way that my brain thinks. I'm thinking in terms of like camera angles, I'm thinking in terms of blocking, light, so on and so forth. So I really liked using this sketchbook because of the toned paper. It allowed me to kind of like focus on where the highlights were going to be, shadows and then midtones. And then also, as I mentioned before, having a sketchbook that's primarily, for idea generation. This one is actually primarily text. This is where I do a lot of my writing. I wouldn't necessarily consider it a journal because I'm going back and forth with drawing and kind of hashing out ideas, but still the concept here is that I am writing down ideas for future paintings, bodies of work, so on and so forth.
I love that.
Yeah, and this is kind of like where everything begins. Every painting that I've made in the last 3 or 4 years has started right here in this book.
So that's like your little black book of painting ideas.
Exactly, exactly.
Love it.
And then I have these two here. These are different ones. These are just smaller, thinner, different form factors. This one obviously has a spiral, so it can fold around. And it's just, once again, opportunity to play, to experiment, to try out different ideas. Even this is actually a walnut ink that I made from scratch from the walnuts in my backyard.
As soon as I saw that color, I was like, is that a walnut ink?
It is that I made. Yep.
That's wonderful.
So testing out, even making my own art materials in here.
And because you hang on to your sketchbooks for so long, you also get to see how that material ages over time.
Yep.
And that's a lot of the things that I do in my own sketchbook are identical to you, and you're experimenting. And I also use the sketchbook as a place to figure out how to use mixed media. So if I'm like, I don't know what this media will do with this media, and then you can layer them, reverse
find out
the layering.
how they interact.
Yeah, exactly, and be able to play with it that way.
Exactly.
Fun.
Actually, this is a good example of that. This is a sketch that I did where I was playing around with when I first got the fine liners. I just wanted to see practically, what could I get away with them? How would they stand up to being painted on top of or side by side with water? So this is a sketch that I did that allowed me to kind of figure that out.
Nice.
So this is Lucy.
Yes.
This is I've painted Lucy several times. Lucy lives in my studio. I am a big fan of painting the things that are around me, the objects that I have access to. I find that in class, I am a huge proponent of having my students keep a sketchbook. And oftentimes they'll say well, I don't know what to draw. I tell me what to draw. I don't know what to draw. And I'm like, just draw what's in front of you.
Yeah.
I am a big proponent of drawing, the everyday objects around us and the things that we might consider mundane, because I find that in doing so, it allows us to find the beauty in places that we wouldn't normally.
Oh,
and I think that as an artist, that's a really important skill to cultivate. And the more we do it, the more that we can find, interesting elements and textures and colors and whatever it is that you might be into, different forms in just the things that are around us. So Lucy, I've lost track of how many times I've drawn her, but I always go back to her because she's just like a fun, beautiful thing to draw. So this is an example of watercolor, gouache, using the fine liners for the drawing, and probably even maybe some charcoal in here as well. I think I mixed in, especially down in here with the shadows and kind of toning in the darker areas. And in doing something as simple as this, it allowed me to kind of figure out exactly, okay, how is this going to meld with this? How can I go ahead and use both in a way that I feel happy with the results?
And this is, so for anybody out there who is wondering why you would do that, this is a great stepping stone before you get to your final piece of art.
Absolutely.
This is where you can experiment, you can make those mistakes, and you don't have to worry about having that panic attack when you're like, oh no, it's not working. You've already figured it out. You already figured out the whole process.
Yeah, I mean, I just did this the other day. I was just...
This is incredible.
Thank you.
It looks like it's glowing. If you look at it on camera, it looks like it's on fire.
Thank you.
So cool.
Well, so this is my salt lamp.
Yep.
It's in my living room. I was just sitting in my living room, hanging out with my dog on the couch, and it was, glowing. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to try and paint it. Why not?
Yeah.
So I have never painted anything like this. And I really don't have a lot of practice with painting things that are sources of illumination. So I figured, you know what? This would be a great place to experiment, see if I can figure it out here before taking the time and the resources to add it into like one of my larger paintings.
Yeah.
And potentially messing it up, I can go ahead and problem solve and figure that out here before going on to the next thing.
Beauty of a sketchbook.
And actually going into what I was saying earlier with the revival colors, this was painted with everything. I mean, just not completely everything here, but yeah, actually, I think I used every color except for the greens.
Where's the greens? But
No, I used every color on here except for the greens to put this together. Yeah, so fun experiments. So we're using the, forgive me if I'm mispronouncing it, Aureolin.
We struggle with pronunciation on the show. We do not judge. We do not judge.
It is this beautiful yellow, Aureolin hue. It is one of the revival colors that Winsor Newton introduced last year, and it is actually a replacement for cobalt yellow.
Which is amazing. So this is not toxic.
Not at all.
Perfect.
Nope. And if anyone ever has any concerns about pigments or information about like individual what might be in the paint, or if there's any kind of concern about the health issues, you can find all of that information on the back of every tube of Winsor Newton paint. There's a wealth of knowledge on here. It will tell you the permanence rating, series number. Permanence rating lets you know like how permanent that pigment is. Like, will it fade over time? Will it be stable in a controlled environment? Light fastness will let you know if it's going to fade. And nope, if there's any concerns about pigments, there'll be a warning on the back of the tube, which there's none on here. It will also let you know what the actual pigment is. In this case, it is PY151 and PBR 7. So that's pigment yellow 151 and pigment brown 7.
Yep.
Interesting. So yeah, and it also let you know if it's like transparent, semi-transparent, so on and so forth. So learning to read the label is always handy. So this is obviously, the yellow right in there. The Fields Orange, which is probably I don't know. I go back and forth with this new set. The Fields Orange and the Tyrian Purple, these are kind of like my favorite colors. I think I use these a lot.
I was going to say, are you mixing them together to get this like transition from the light to the dark?
Yeah, so
I'm
actually...
excited to see these mixed. I'm ready to like play with them. But
wait, let's go ahead and I can show you. So the fun thing about these is that, let's go ahead and wet this down. And I'm going to use this side, or actually, might as well right here. Let's go ahead and do it. So this is that yellow, right? Beautiful. Really nice, rich, dense, powerful yellow.
Yeah.
Absolutely love it. And then we've got our Fields Orange, which is just such a lovely, vibrant orange here.
That's insane.
And it's actually pretty opaque well, I wouldn't say it's like completely opaque, it's like semi, but still, it just retains so much color information.
Yeah, I was say on camera, it almost looks like it's glowing by itself.
There we go.
Makes sense. But
and then this Tyrian Purple is actually, I love it. It's
that's a good purple.
If you're familiar with dioxazine, which is also a favorite color of mine, this one leans a little bit more on the reddish side, and it is more transparent.
Okay.
So mixing these together, you can start to play around with like these nice brownish tones. That kind of like
warm though.
Yeah, warm. It almost brings out the red. The red in the orange and the red in the purple kind of complement each other, and that's how you're able to get something that looks a little bit more like with a little bit more layering, a little bit more density. It can be, start to build up and be
This
closer
anytime
to
anybody's
this.
watching my show and I go, "This is pretty mud." That is.
Is that pretty mud?
It's a muddy color because you're turning down that saturation, but it is so pretty.
Yes.
It is so pretty.
And then,
Love it.
And then this is another favorite of mine here. This one is the Oswald Gray. This one, if you want to talk about pretty mud, this one, this is
We love mud
the
here.
prettiest mud. It is this
Whoa.
really kind of warm gray that is, depending on, you know, how you want to apply it, it can be very opaque.
I'm not stealing your tube of paint, I swear.
And then
Oh
you
my
can
gosh,
it's
pretty.
so pretty. I love it.
That's
I love
cool.
it. And you can warm it up. It tones well.
Yeah.
With other colors, it plays well with them.
Oh, that purple. Honestly, because I've been painting a lot of rocks lately, because I was in, you know, like Tahoe area. That actually looks like the perfect rock color to me. Like, especially with the shadows, because it's like this weird brown gray, and that works so perfectly.
I mean, yeah, so take, you know, this matched with that gives you just this nice, dense, thick, kind
Yeah.
of like, pretty mud?
Pretty mud.
Pretty mud.
We love mud.
So, yeah.
Beige.
Big grayish.
It's Katie's favorite color. Well, that and turquoise. That's really pretty.
Yeah, so it's fun. It's fun to kind of like, you know, play around with these and see what I can get. Also, as you can see, there's two greens on here. This one is cinnabar green, and this one is a viridian hue. These, I mean, if you are into, I'm just going to go ahead and lay this in here real quick.
Oh,
If you are
can't mess that
into plant life,
Nice.
I mean, just those two greens just give you so much, and then you add in the Aureolin yellow, or even just like...
Which it looks like that's what you were doing here.
Yep, that is, exactly. Here's
So it
another example
punches it
here,
out.
and having
yeah.
the field's orange coming in through because there was some sunlight hitting the side of the leaf on this side here, so I wanted a little pop of orange and yellow in there, but then having that blue-green as it turned over into the shadows, which, you know what, let's go ahead and play with that right here while I have this one prepped. So let's just go straight into it.
And while you are getting that ready, we do have a question.
Yes. Chloe has two questions
Okay.
on YouTube. She was wondering, how do you generally wipe off your brushes during your sketching watercolor practice, and do you ever tape off your pages when you're sketching?
The first question about wiping, so there's a couple different ways. I, for convenience sake, will just paper towels. Just regular paper towels. I mean, you know, these are pretty easy to find everywhere. Some kind of napkin, like especially like if I'm in a hotel room,
Yeah.
or, you know, you can just find napkins pretty easily. Paper towels always work. But when I am at home in my home studio, I actually have diapers.
That's
Yeah.
right. Babies.
That's
I
right.
love that. So
I
much.
have cloth reusable diapers. If you can
So
still
absorbent.
find them,
That is the key.
if you can still find them, I have the ones that like literally it's just a sheet of cotton.
Yeah.
And that you back in the day you would have to like use pins
little
on the
nappy
sides.
pins,
Yeah,
yep.
exactly.
That's so funny.
I bought a pack of them, gosh, decades ago, and those are my number one like go-to watercolor painting rags. They're soft, so they don't disturb the bristles of your brushes, but they're super absorbent. And when you need to clean them, you could just toss them in the laundry.
Yeah.
So
And if anybody does work with any of those pigments that are concerning, like the cadmiums and things, they also have those portable washers that you can actually just have on your countertop, and you can have them washed that way, and that way the water gets drained out, and then you can dispose of the water safely.
very
In
good
case.
point. Very
In
good
case.
point. In case you're using any of those questionable pigments. And as far as taping off my pages, No, I don't really do that actually. If I want to have like a border or something, I will just go ahead and let it kind of be free flowing. Or I will draw it ahead of time.
Yeah.
So like for instance with this page, I knew that I just wanted to have like these 4 spaces to do very specifically plant studies. And so I just used my fine liner and I literally just drew these rectangles to give myself, and then I toned them, actually toned them with, I haven't talked about these 2 yet, but this one here is the ultramarine ash, and then this is a mineral gray. And so this is the ultramarine ash right here, and then that is the mineral gray right there.
So pretty.
And I like pre-toning my pages before I draw or paint on them, especially when I am carrying around gouache. Either this one is ivory black and this one is permanent white. Just because it gives me a little bit more tooth. It gives me like a surface to kind of like start to build up and kind of paint a little bit more directly on top of it. And also when you are drawing on top of a pre-painted or pre-toned surface, it gives it a little bit more of a tooth that it just feels nice to draw on. It gives it like a really nice kind of like, I don't know, it's almost gives it a little bit more roughness that I feel like just my pen just kind of slows down a little bit on the surface of the paper, and it makes it a little bit more deliberate when I'm drawing.
I like that.
So yeah, I don't really tape off. This is kind of like my, one approach and then the other approach there.
Yeah. And I do both of those. Actually, I have my sketchbook down here, which is the same as yours.
Can we see it?
Yes, absolutely. I actually did a sketch that I still have to paint. And this is something that, like, for me, I just sketched a really messy border. And I'm probably going to go in with a fine liner and then just sort of messily also mark out the border. If you aren't intentionally making it a crispy, perfect little line, and you lean into the messiness, it looks like this is not perfect. You have some areas where they're not.
Oh yeah, there's
perfect.
the line is wavering.
Exactly.
I mean, I messed up right here. You can see where there's
But
a double
they're
line.
all consistent, and it all looks very intentional. And again, this is also a sketchbook.
Right.
This is not a finished piece.
Right.
This is just my personal brain on page. So if I did want to tape it off, I've done that before. I don't think I actually have done this in this one, actually. Yeah, because I went all the way to the edge and had a little bit left over here. This one
It's gorgeous.
Thank you. I also just went kind of toward the edge, but I didn't go all the way. Oh, I'm not even on camera. I didn't go all the way to the edge, all the way around. I just kind of sloppily toned my whole thing. So it kind of comes and goes. I did have a sketchbook. It's the same brand, and it's the square one, where I did have one painting that I did a little color study. And I had taped that off, and then I did my color swatches next to it. So it's, potato.
Yeah, I mean, there's...
So I was going to say, do I have my tape underneath here? No. Usually the tape that I use, I always go for the White Artist Pro tape. On our website, if you just search for Pro tape, that comes up. It has a low tack, and it doesn't tear my pages, which is so important.
That is the only tape that I use, actually. But yeah, just going back to what you were just saying, like this is actually an example of, kind of another pre-toned page where I'll just lay down color and then go ahead and at some point in the future draw on top of this and paint on top of it, just in order to like build texture and play with different color combinations.
And this happens to me a lot, where I have just pages that are just like big splotches of color because I got a brand new color and I wanted to see what that color did. And I can't wait for a whole piece that I'm going to be painting with it. So I just did a big blob in my sketchbook, and then I will cover it up later, or I'll work with it and I'll, kind of come and go with gouache if I want opacity, and then the watercolors kind of work with it. And that's what I love about it. Exactly. But now I know what my colors do.
But I do think that, when talking about sketchbooks, the idea that I really want to get across is that we can be as precious as we want with our sketchbooks. We can turn our sketchbooks into individual works of art. They can be an art book from beginning to end. That's one way to approach it. There's also the way where it's just a bunch of haphazard sketches and experiments, you know, and both are correct.
Yes. No wrong answer.
Exactly.
Do we have any more questions, though? Just to check in, I think if you guys do have questions as we go through this process, of course, you can always plug it into the chats as well. We do have our amazing moderators here that will ask them live in case you guys do have some other questions. Yes?
Yes, James on YouTube was wondering what colors you used for the botanical leaves that you were just showing.
So these right here, I was using the cinnabar green, which is this one right here. I was using the Viridian hue. So cinnabar, let's go ahead and actually, I'll just go ahead and put some right in here. This one is going to be a really lovely, I don't even, it's just beautiful, kind of, there's a yellow undertone to it.
But it feels like a good solid like mid-tone green.
Yeah, it's just like a nice solid, exactly. This is like just green.
Just
but like
green.
with a yellow undertone to it. It's really versatile, and I think that it's like you can see how that's playing into some of the areas here. I did obviously still introduce some yellow into here, but yeah, it plays well and it tones down really nice, especially when you start mixing it with some of the grays that we have here, like this mineral gray. Let's go ahead and just kind of see what happens when we tone that down a little bit. Put that side by side.
Nice.
See what I mean? It's just
So
kind
just
of like a
pulls the
nice,
saturation
yeah, it just
down
pulls the
just a little bit.
saturation down, and it kind of just it creates like a you know, your standard tone. Like a tint is when we're adding white to a color to make something a little bit more pastel. A shade is when we're adding black. Tone is when we're adding gray. This mineral gray is a wonderful gray for creating those more neutral tones if we want to just kind of like
pretty.
desaturate a green a little bit.
Yeah.
Or this green in particular. And then the other one is this Viridian hue, which is really super electric blue-green. And
so this, when we say that the cinnabar has those yellow undertones, this is where you can really see, because they're both green. This one's going to lean a lot more towards blue, and that cinnabar is going to lean a lot more towards yellow, so you can have that variety of where, you know, that range of color.
exactly.
Which is beautiful.
So in an instance down here with this leaf, I was definitely leaning more towards the cinnabar in these areas where the light was hitting it directly, but then in the shadow areas, I was using more of the Viridian in order to kind of create a cooler shadow effect in this specific kind of areas on the underside or in the shadow part of the folds of the leaf.
Color temperature.
Exactly, color temperature. So yeah, here's an example of the cinnabar and the Viridian. And then so in addition to these two greens, I used the Aureolin yellow, which, you know, I showed earlier. And I also used this, going back to the Oswald gray.
Is that what you did in the shadows, where you did a little bit of the Oswald with the Viridian?
Yes.
Yes.
Exactly.
Love it.
So let's just go ahead and well, that had a little bit of that Tyrian purple in there, but let's pull this aside here, and we've got that. Now let's pull the Viridian. This is going to make a nice...
Ooh. Okay, there's my favorite color.
Okay,
Dark teal.
look at that.
That's beautiful.
So that'll give you some really nice darker
Shadows. Oh, yeah.
with the plants.
There
So
it
yeah,
is.
and then just you've got a full range. I mean, from this is just the cinnabar. Remember, this is just cinnabar by itself. This is the Viridian with the Oswald gray. And I mean, just between these two, you know, using three colors, you can get a range of different greens just from, you know, just
a
using
couple
those.
colors. I love it. Do we have another question?
Yeah, we were on Facebook wondering if you could explain the difference between gouache and watercolor.
Oh, sure, absolutely. So the biggest thing to remember is that gouache and watercolor use the exact same pigments. So there's absolutely no difference there. If you are using a French ultramarine watercolor and a French ultramarine gouache, they're going to be the exact same pigment. The difference between watercolor and gouache is that gouache tends to have a higher pigment load, making it more opaque. There are certain colors where there's going to be a calcium carbonate added to it in order to increase the opacity, especially with pigments that tend to be more intrinsically more transparent.
Yeah.
But really, that's it. You're talking about more pigment, and maybe, not even with all colors, but maybe for some very specific pigments that lean more transparent, the addition of calcium carbonate. But that's it. They're both water soluble. They both use gum arabic as their binder, and that's really the difference. Is just the opacity between
definitely.
the two.
Watercolor always does lean transparent, and then gouache is got the opacity.
Yeah.
That's really the biggest thing. But they play well with each other. So if you do want to mix them together in your sketchbook or in a piece, they work really well together.
I actually do that all the time in my work. So the way that I paint, I have been doing it long enough that I know that certain pigments, I'm going to want them to lean a little bit more opaque than others. There are certain pigments that I'm going to want to be staining colors, which are going to be a little bit more transparent. So for instance, what's a good example of that? We already mentioned dioxazine. For dioxazine, I really like using dioxazine to kind of like glaze over and add a little bit of that like purple quality, especially when I'm dealing with figurative work, in order to kind of introduce that into, as I'm transitioning from a light to a shadow side of the figure. So I'm going to want that to be more transparent.
That makes sense.
However, I also know that a pigment such as burnt umber, I use the hell out of burnt umber, and I want that to be more opaque.
Yeah.
So that typically on my palette is going to be a gouache rather than a watercolor.
Which honestly, if you want opaque burnt umber, that makes sense.
Yeah, and I mean you can
Water it down as well.
You can water it down, but also conversely, you can use burnt umber watercolor and paint it with just less water, and it will be opaque.
True.
But for the way that I approach painting certain things, it just is faster if I have the opaque version.
Yep.
But yeah, there's absolutely no reason, you can't swap out certain colors on your palette for watercolor and gouache, or even both
And especially
on the same palette.
Then like the same line, like Winsor Newton makes watercolor, Winsor Newton also makes gouache, so they are pretty transferable.
100%.
100%.
I mean, they're the exact same pigments.
Yes.
So they play well together. Absolutely. Yeah.
So fun. I love it.
That's a great question. I always love that one.
Yeah. And we have a leaf to paint, but
We do
I know
have a
we
leaf
also
to paint,
still
yeah.
have more questions.
I am happy to answer
So,
questions.
What do we got?
We were wondering where these leaves are from. Do you have a model for these, or are these from memory?
These leaves?
Yes.
They are from my house. That's a pretty simple question. Answer. These are my plant babies. This one here is
Reuben
Gertrude.
likes to, I love this. Reuben likes to draw what's in front of him.
Exactly.
So.
Yeah.
Gertrude.
This is Patricia.
Oh my gosh, it really is labeled Gertrude. It says it on the painting. I love this.
Yeah. So these are my plants in my living room.
I love it. All right. So, out of my own curiosity, who named the plant?
I did.
Okay.
Yep.
I love this. This makes me so happy.
Okay. So. What's that?
Patricia got me.
So fun story. Actually, the first plant, Patricia, was actually given to my wife, Naomi, for her birthday. And she does not enjoy taking care of plants.
Gotcha.
But it was a birthday present. So,
you
you
can't
can't
really-
and I was like, no, you know what? I have always had a black thumb.
I was like, did you give her the plant?
I did not.
Okay.
I did
I
not.
was like, ooh.
But I have always had a black thumb, and I was like, you know what? No. We were given this plant. It was a gift. We are going to take care of it. I will take care of it.
I love it.
So I thought that maybe if I gave her a name, she'd last longer.
And she has.
And she
right?
has,
There
yeah.
you
She's
go.
been around for a couple years now. It's the
Life lesson. If you accidentally kill your plants,
Give it a name.
them.
Yeah, give it a name.
This is why I have a peace lily on the other side of the studio over there. Really hard to kill. It's a peace lily that's still alive. Listen.
Shrinking.
Shh. She just needs water. She's being dramatic. That's why I have a peace lily, because she's an indoor cat and she's dramatic. She tells me when she needs water.
I will say though, I know very little about plants, so these ones that I do have, I'm just trying to keep them going as long as possible.
I love
But
it.
I do not consider myself to be an expert at all. So speaking of plants, just to give you a little update on what I'm doing here. So we're going to go ahead and move forward with painting this polka dot plant, which I started off my sketchbook painting one. I showed you earlier here.
Stunning.
So what I have done here, and this is one of the things I wanted to talk about today, was the art masking fluid. This is something that I use often in my larger works. And if you are unfamiliar with art masking fluid, basically what it does is it creates a resist on the paper so that anywhere where you apply this, it will not allow the pigment to stain the paper. So
That's the yellow.
if you
guys are
see,
seeing.
if you can see the yellow dots that are on here, that's this. It is tinted yellow to make it easier to see.
Love it.
So that you can remove it later
Yes.
on.
Can't tell you how many times I've forgotten to remove some.
But it is kind of a latex based masking fluid. So there are a couple things to be aware of. The first is that you never want to apply this to wet paper.
No.
If you apply the masking fluid, because it is latex based, if you apply it to wet paper fibers, it will fuse with those fibers, and when you try to remove it, it will rip your paper. So you can only apply this to dry paper. So that's number one. Number two is that you want to wait until it is fully dry before painting on it or painting over it. So that's why these were already laid down before we started the demo today, because we wanted to give it time to actually dry.
Yeah.
Because depending on ambient humidity, it can take a little longer to dry depending on the situation.
And it's raining here today, so,
So
it's very
it would take
humid
a little
in the
bit,
studio.
yeah.
Yeah. So, but if you're in like a desert, like it can dry a lot faster. It
Exactly.
It always depends on your studio conditions. In case anybody out there is curious.
And the other thing to be aware of is how you apply it. So brush care. Because it is a latex fluid, it will stick to the bristles or the hairs of your brush. So I personally would never use one of my good brushes to apply the masking fluid. I actually have these retired old sad brushes that I don't know if you can see it. I don't know if we can see it, but it's just one fused bristle now. It is just an applicator.
Yes.
It is no longer a brush. It is a masking fluid applicator only. So I have a bunch of these. I basically have a mason jar in my studio of retired brushes, and they're basically brushes that I didn't take care of properly. And so when they die, they go into the mason jar in order to be born again as
an applicator.
Applicators.
Yeah. I love it.
So this is how I do that.
Recycle your brushes.
Exactly.
That's perfect.
Exactly.
And eventually there'll be a sculpture.
You know what? Maybe.
Into one.
Yeah, the tops of all of your brushes are just going to fuse into one big applicator. It's happened to me, not gonna lie. But that's so if you out there don't have any brushes that you're ready to retire, we do have some brushes that are available that are disposable brushes. That's something that I always reach for if I don't have a brush that like I've already killed, because like you never want to use a brush that you care about. That latex will not come out of the bristles. I have had some success with using a like if you dip your brush in a little bit of like dish soap before you actually apply it, that works to an extent, but it always makes me a little nervous just because I never know how the soap is going to affect my paints, the actual masking fluid, whatever it may be. And it just, my brain goes, you're mixing soap into your art supplies, and that doesn't seem like a grand idea. But not a ton, like you're not having it drip off of the bristles or anything, but it does create a little bit of a barrier.
I personally, I
Makes me
don't
nervous.
trust myself in my ability to clean it properly, and hence they end up looking like this.
Yeah.
So I have tried the dish soap thing, and I know that that's definitely something you can do. I personally, yeah, I'm just not very good at it.
That's valid. That's valid.
So
Neither am I.
I just have my my brush graveyard to
There you go.
choose from.
So, and that's like I said, if you don't have a brush graveyard, disposable brushes are a great way to go. That way you are still saving your nicer brushes for that. And then of course, like they are disposable brushes, but you can continue to reuse them as an applicator for your masking fluid for a good long time, and you don't have to just one and done. But if you do want a one and done and you just don't have the wherewithal to keep it or deal with it, also acceptable. Whatever gets you guys being creative.
Speaking of brushes, the one that I'm using right now is Winsor Newton's Synthetic Sable Rigger. A rigger brush, for those not familiar, it has like a really long, it has really long bristles, and the point of this is typically, for line work. It allows you to kind of get like really nice fluid. It holds a lot of paint. It allows for nice fluid line work. This is great for grass, hair, anything where you might want to have these like wispy lines and stuff.
Oh yeah.
But I actually really like using it because of how much paint it holds.
Makes sense.
The longer the bristles, the more water, the more paint it's actually going to be able to hold, the less times that I need to like reapply, reload.
Yeah.
So it allows me to kind of just like go, especially if I'm painting like quickly. So that's why this has become one of my staples with, especially traveling, just painting on the fly. Even if I'm not traveling, like even just like sometimes I'll just go to like a brewery or a coffee shop, bring my sketchbook with me.
I love going to coffee shops with my sketchbook.
Yeah, and just
So
kind of
fun.
like sit, enjoy your beverage, and just paint the things around you. This is a great option for that because you just don't have to load it up as much. So yeah, and it allows for, as you can see, I can lay down large flat areas, or I can do something a little bit more
Nice fine
delicate
lines.
and detailed, fine lined.
Yeah.
This one in particular is the size 6. 6 is kind of like a sweet spot for me personally. Not too small, not too big. It allows for a variety of mark making that I'm just in my practice. I know that because of the way that I make marks, because of my own personal style, my own personal way that I apply paint, I just know that the number 6 is going to be pretty handy. The other one that I have here is a 1-stroke. This is a 1/2 inch. The 1/2 inch and the 1 inch are like my two favorite go-to like wash brushes. For those who were paying attention, they might have noticed that I laid down some water on the leaf so that I could, prior to applying the pigment, so that I can paint wet on wet in order to get this kind of like bleeding effect in here. I also really like using this just for blocking in and making chunkier, larger brush strokes. I like to paint typically from large to small.
Same.
Start off with larger areas, work down to the details. So I'll begin with this and kind of like follow up with that.
Yeah.
So these are just
makes
kind of
sense.
like a couple of the tools that I brought today that I wanted to highlight. Actually, let me go ahead and finish this real quick just so we can kind of see how the masking fluid is going to work here. And while this dries, I will say that before removing the masking fluid, we want to let the paint dry completely.
Very,
right?
very
So,
important tip.
So,
If you don't, your paper will rip.
yes.
I've learned that's the hard way.
So
Very frustrating.
while this dries, and remember, it's humid because of all the rain we've got here. While this dries, I'm going to talk about some of my other favorite tools that I've brought.
Yeah.
Namely, this professional watercolor Winsor Newton field set. I have, as I mentioned earlier when I showed the first page of my sketchbook, I have had one of these, the Cotman version, since college, and it's still kicking. This is my new one. This is the professional watercolors. So the difference is that in this set is the professional line of watercolors, and in my other set it's the Cotman. Cotman is more of the introductory line of Winsor Newton watercolor paints. The biggest difference between the Cotman and the professional line is, once again, pigment load. So by introductory, they're going to be a little bit more affordable than the professional line. They're typically geared towards people who are starting out and might not want to invest as much in getting professional watercolors. So you can go ahead and try out the Cotman. It's the exact same pigments, the same as with the gouache, exact same pigments. They're interchangeable. It's just a difference that there's less pigment load.
Yeah.
And, actually, I
And
thought
it would cost a little less.
so therefore, because it's less, well, pigment is the most
that
expensive
is the
part
part
of
that
paint.
you're buying. That's
That's
you're
really
buying.
what you're paying
Yeah.
for, is the pigment.
Absolutely.
So I thought this was actually interesting when I was comparing here.
Oh yeah. 'Cause you can see the.
you can
it's
see-
pretty light. It's vibrant. It's really beautiful colors.
Right, but it's a little bit more subdued when compared to these. So let's go ahead and look at cadmium red here. I kind of wish I had done them side by side,
Yeah.
but cadmium red here versus the cadmium red here, or like the alizarin crimson versus the alizarin crimson.
Yeah.
Just little things like that. You're going to notice that there's just a little bit more, it's just a little bit more pigment dense, a little bit more
Yeah.
pigment rich in the professional line.
Yeah.
But still,
You can
Great.
get to that pigment density with you can get to a certain point with the Cotman, but with the professional, you'll get there a lot faster.
exactly.
Yeah.
So, for anyone unfamiliar, this is the way that this travel set is set up.
I love
It's
this.
actually designed so that you can put your thumb in there, and it is a working palette.
A little travel palette.
Yeah.
And you were telling me this was technically meant for water, but you've just stuck in a little bit of white gouache, right?
Exactly. So yeah,
it.
this little spot right here, which you can change depending on whether or not you are left-handed or right-handed,
Love that.
is typically meant for water. But I use way more water than this when I'm working,
Yep.
and I tend to beat up my paper. So I actually use this little tray to drop in a little bit of white gouache.
I love it.
And white gouache is, going back to comparing actually, the masking fluid here is great when you have time to plan ahead, right? This is when you know that you are going to draw something in advance, you want to keep something in your painting white, or you just want to resist keep a previous layer a certain color, and have that you're going to layer on top, and you don't want the subsequent layer to affect the previous layer. Masking fluid. However, on the go, when you don't really have the time to let it dry, you don't have the planning, you're a little bit more on the fly.
White gouache.
White gouache. White gouache is great. You can see an example of some of that being used here on the highlights in the skull here. White gouache is awesome because you can just go ahead, you can use it to call back highlights, but you can also mix it with colors and make it an opaque color.
It
Exactly.
does go more pastel because you are mixing white into it.
Right, so
but-
you are creating a tint.
Yes.
However, it is still totally possible to kind of even just increase the color options you have in your palette by using that. So let's take, let's see what happens when Which one should we mix it in with?
Let's do the Fields Orange.
Fields Orange? Yeah, I don't think
We're
I've done that
obsessed.
yet. Let's do that. Okay,
I
so
love when an orange gets tinted because then it either goes a little bit yellow and like peachy, or it can go real pink sometimes.
let's see what happens. I actually haven't tried this
love
yet,
it.
so let's see what happens. Okay.
Experimentation.
So this is the permanent white gouache. This is the Fields Orange.
All right.
Let's pull a little bit and see what we get. Ooh, peach.
Peachy.
It's going peachy.
I like it.
Yeah.
It's good peach.
Let's go ahead and put this down and see how that looks.
Oh, that's pretty.
Oh, that is
So
really
now you
pretty.
have a good peachy kind of color that you have on your palette, and you haven't even added color.
Exactly,
Makes
and
me so happy.
that color doesn't exist in this palette. So now, by having a little bit of white here, I've expanded the range of my pre-existing palette.
I love it.
That's fun. I like that.
All the colors. All the colors.
Now I want to try the Tyrian purple. Let's see what happens with that.
Bet you it's gonna go.
Tyrian purple, by the way, I love this color. So this was originally made in the Mediterranean by processing sea snails. And it was so expensive to produce. Wow, look at how that actually
That's pretty.
retains a lot of its original color information. So it was so expensive to produce that it was typically reserved for royalty back in the day. So this is like,
That's fun.
Roman Empire purple
That's
robes
really-
and whatnot.
That has Amanda's name all over it. She's
That
nodding
purple?
her head, yes. That is Amanda's color. Love it.
That's a nice little color combo.
I like it.
I like that.
That's so fun. Now, I did notice you have a teeny tiny little brush in your palette there.
Yes.
is
So
adorable.
this is the little itty bitty brush. This one actually comes with the field set. It is, as you can see, teeny tiny. I have big hands. And so this little itty bitty brush is a little problematic for me. It's just kind of, I have to, I'm just holding it like this and my hand can cramp up. So
Yeah.
actually, I have another one of these. This is from my previous set, the Cotman set. I have actually put a little bit of artist tape. That's
Yeah.
the artist tape that you were talking about. Around it to increase the width of the handle here. And then this is a charcoal holder.
I love that.
And now I can put it in here.
That's great.
And I now have
A longer handle.
so that I can paint a little bit more directly, a little bit more freely. I get my hand away from the page so that I can make a more freeing gesture. Whereas with this, I'm a little closer. It's a little harder to kind of move around.
Yeah.
With this, it's more of like a flick of the fingers rather than moving of the whole arm in order to get the marks that I might want. However, this isn't the only way that you have to go. Actually,
Especially when traveling and working in a sketchbook.
you just introduced me to these
I
before we
did.
started, and I would love for you
I
to talk
did.
about those.
These right here are our Travel Oasis brushes. So I have one more size that I think is on my desk over there. I think I'm just missing the 6. So we have an 8, a 6, a 4, and a 2. I did pop those in the teacher's card as well. So what these are our little travel brushes. I'll actually take this and flick it around. So the handle comes apart just like that. And then actually I'm going to get this wet because it's a lot easier to put it away when your bristles are wet and nice and sharp point. So you just kind of thread it through, pop it in, and there's a hole down here to make sure that it doesn't mold, which is really
So that it
important.
can breathe and dry
Yes.
inside the
And then, so
handle.
this is essentially the same size as your little.
Yeah, and look, it fits right in there.
And it extends just like you were wanting your brush to do. But with these, this is our synthetic bristle, which was made in Germany. And the guy that makes these is absolutely obsessed with brushes, and it shows because he has created all these little synthetic filaments for the bristles to mimic all the different ways that natural hair actually moves, because you're gonna have different shapes. And then he has some crazy technology computer system that selects the amount of each type of filament that goes into these bristles so that it can mimic a true natural hair brush while it's also still synthetic.
Can
You
I try one?
Yes, please. Which one would you like?
I'm going to try this one. This is...
We're obsessed.
This is the number 8.
Yes.
Let's give that a shot. Let's see
So
how that...
this will hold, just like you were saying, you like the rigger brush for a lot of water and you don't want to have to reload. This will hold a ton of water.
Oh, awesome.
So that's why, with them taking that technology and incorporating it into the synthetic line, you get that ability to hold on to a lot of pigment, a lot of water, and because they're the rounds, you can get them to have a really fine point tip, like you just got really fine lines, but then you can apply more pressure and get more variation. They're just a really fun brush, and I like that we have them for travel. So again, while I was traveling around for work here, I just popped these in my backpack with my sketchbook and a little travel kit, and so everything that I had was, this size with just a couple of things attached on top of it, and this whole thing fit into my purse. And if you wanted a smaller sketchbook, you can fit into a smaller purse. So it's really wonderful to be able to carry your supplies and not destroy your shoulders, not have to carry this whole massive setup. Just something that you can take out of your purse or your bag, backpack, whatever it may be that you're carrying. Pop it on your lap and be able to do some art really fast, even while you're sitting on a bus or while you're waiting for, something to go on, waiting for lunch or, having a cup of coffee in a cafe. That's what I love about sketchbooks, is that you can still be creative for, however much time that you have, because we're all very busy people. We have things that we need to do. So this will allow you to have that moment of creativity, whether it's for fun or experimentation, or you're just simply trying to capture what you see in the moment. But I love it.
Absolutely. I mean, I couldn't agree more. One of the things that I find that I personally struggle with is when I want to make something, I'm like, oh, I got to go into the studio. I got to clean it up from the night before. I need to clean my palette. I got to... There's just so many barriers to entry when art making is being considered, right? Yes. It's like the energy that you need in order to just get up and go. Having a sketchbook and, a mini palette like this, or even if you've got your bigger palette like this, where you have more mixing space and you can put more colors on it, having it ready to go just gets rid of any of those excuses. Yeah. And it's a little bit more immediate, and it doesn't have to be perfect, and it's just a place to play, experiment, and have fun. And that's really what it's all about, right? I
agree. Now we are getting a little bit closer to the end of our show here. We are essentially at an hour already. I've been enjoying watching you paint so much.
Well, let's go ahead and pull up some of this frisket then.
I love it. And while you're doing that, I'm going to just double check. Do we have any last minute questions for Reuben here? Just in case. But I am curious as to how you're going to pull that up.
Well, I'm going to go ahead and draw on top real quick while I let the paint
go
dry
ahead.
just a little bit, because as I said, we don't want to pull it up on wet paint,
right?
That's
true.
So I'm going to go ahead and,
No, you're fine.
Wet paint on here, fine liner. This is the number, the 0.5, which is my favorite. This is the one that I carry around with me. If I'm only going to take one, there's a set here that we sell, and it is ranges from 1, which is going to be the thickest. That's a chunky boy right there.
Love it.
All the way down to the 0.1, which is going to be the thinnest, as you can see right there.
Delicate details.
I tend to like having the 0.5 just because if I'm going to carry one, once again, if it's, the whole idea is to pare down your kit to the bare essentials, this one is going to be somewhere in between, right? So, as I said before, you want to let it dry before you paint on top of it. However, even though this is wet paint, I can still come on top and draw on top of the paint, and guess what? It goes on just fine.
Now, are you going to notice any, I'm curious to see if you're going to have any bleeding because your paper is wet and you're drawing on top of wet paper. Is it going to have a little bit of feathering at all?
So, maybe a little, but what I do notice more than anything else is that it might skip.
Okay.
It might skip, and it might leave an area where, like, if I'm encountering a particularly wet spot, it just will kind of like roll over it.
Okay.
And then I might just have to go back. But as far as like the bleeding, this isn't. It is a possibility that can happen.
It's like, I'm not
but as you
seeing
can
it,
see,
though.
it's not happening. But I think it's
Yeah.
also because it isn't overly saturated.
Yeah. This isn't dripping wet.
This isn't dripping
Kinda like
wet.
it's not
I'm not
it's
trying to
puddle.
like, yeah. So this isn't necessarily going to just like bleed like crazy. It bleeds more in my experience when you lay it down and then come in
immediately
with water. But even then,
Oh, it's
very
so limited.
little.
Yeah.
Very little.
That's amazing.
So that's why I like these so
I love
much. Let's see, and let's feel. I'm going to do a little touch test to see how dry it is. Yeah, I think we can go ahead and pull these up. This one up here is a little too wet, but down here I think it's dry enough for us to remove. So, two ways that I like to, well, I prefer this. This is a rubber cement remover. I like using this as this is a pickup to pull the latex for the masking fluid.
Yeah,
Go for it.
show. So like this has clearly been used. Like you have some like pigments and things on the edge, but it's just a chunk of rubber, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah. You can also use your finger.
Yeah.
I tend to not like using my finger
Same.
because inevitably you have oils on your finger, and by rubbing the latex off this way, you are now introducing those oils onto your paper, which then if you want to paint on top of, could be problematic.
Yes.
So I prefer this because this is just cleaner.
Oh yeah.
But basically,
I also so like on occasion I've noticed that on my masking fluid I can sometimes have like a little bit of paint that is sitting just on top of the frisket. And I will get that onto my hand, and as I'm like, if you rub that over here into like the lighter areas,
and then you're going to
now
introduce that
introducing
pigment.
into, and you're smearing it, which is, you know, you do have some hydration to your hand too, so like that's going to be a problem, and that's the rubber cement pickup is worth it.
Absolutely.
Very
So
worth
if you can see this, just gently, very gently, you don't need to apply a lot of pressure. You just very gently kind of like rub back and forth, and it will just pull that frisket
Like
off.
a magnet.
And it just kind of collects, and then you can like, you know, collect all of those little bits and toss them in the garbage after. But now, as you can see, it preserved the white of the paper.
I love it.
In an instance where there is pigment sitting on top of the masking fluid, rather than rub back and forth, I tend to prefer to just pull from one direction, so that if any of that pigment is going to, let's say it isn't completely dry, or because it's latex, it hasn't adhered to it, there is the possibility of introducing that onto your paper. But I find that if I pick it up in one direction, it actually rolls the pigment into the latex, and you get a clean
Love it.
removal that way.
I like that.
So
Good tips.
yeah, and then that is how I preserved the
Polka dots.
on the
I love
plant.
And then after that, would you then go in with more layers and?
I would, yes, absolutely.
I love it.
You know, the other thing too that I did, especially with the first one that I showed here, is that what I did was I actually painted, I tinted the leaves first. So if you notice, some of these polka dots are a little bit more blue, some of them are a little bit more yellow, a little bit more orange, warmer, especially like you can compare this
that
one
sun setting.
and that one
Yeah.
to here, for instance.
Yeah.
So I actually just did a wash on the
light
leaves,
wash.
a light wash, because I knew that the polka dots needed a little bit of color, but not so much. And then I added the masking fluid on top
After it was dry.
after it was dry to preserve those little moments, those little
that.
tints of color, and then I painted the rest of the leaf on top.
I love it.
And then when I pulled it up, I still had the color information of it being a little bit of orange, a little bit of blue,
So fun.
whatever needed in order to show that the light was shining through it.
I love it. That's great. Well, that sounds like it was our show. Do we have any
Awesome.
more things that we need to touch base on that we forgot?
Let's see, we talked about masking fluid, talked about gouache, fine liners, rigger brush, travel, using your sketchbook as a place to experiment, using it as an archive, a tome of your artistic journey and development.
We love a good tome around here. such a great word.
Yeah, and we even talked a little bit more about the revival colors, which are super exciting.
I'm so excited to try those.
Yeah, if there are any other questions, then
I think we are good for now. But if you guys are watching in the future and you do have questions about the process or the materials or anything that we covered today, you can always leave it as a comment, and I will always make sure that they get back to Reuben and myself, and we will answer you in the comments that way.
Absolutely.
But of course, if you also are trying this and you're playing around with sketchbooks and all the fun things that we talked about today, and you want to post them online, any social media, please tag us at JerrysArtarama. I will also share with Reuben. We love seeing what you guys create. It makes us so happy.
Yeah, it's always great to see what people produce after these demos.
I know. It makes it's best. But that is today's show. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Again, if you want to check out any of our supplies that we were talking about today, go to the website JerrysArtarama.com and type in today's class code, which is JL383. In that search bar, that'll bring up our teacher's cart, and you can check it out that way. And of course, make sure you join us next week, because I will be back, and we're going to bring your artwork from meh to masterpiece. I am so excited about this. I am going to be working in oils, but the lessons I'm going to be teaching is going to be transferable to all media, but it's going to be talking about taking your skill set from that level of, kind of when you hit that plateau and trying to get even further past and pushing your artwork a little bit further with your skill set. So it's going to be pretty fun. I'm excited. Awesome. All right. That was the show. Are you ready?
I'm ready. We're going to dance off.
Yes, we are.
All right. Let's do it.
We'll see you guys next week. Bye.